Stu, and this is the first week of December, sort of catch up, reading review, reading roundup kind of situation. The first book I'm going to talk about is one that I listened to, and that was The True Story of Raja the Gullible and His Mother by Rabi Alamuddin. And I like normally when I make these videos, because I just really want to talk about books because I don't get to talk about books that much. They bore non-book people. Talking too much about books bores non-book people. However, I have talked about this book to everybody, sports fans, book fans, innocent bystanders, because I just enjoyed this book so much. It's the National Book Award winner of this year of 2025, and it is a fantastic piece of heartful literature with dark humor, sharp social criticism, and great character development, and use of setting in a way that I really thoroughly enjoy as I'm really into setting in this sort of recent reading period of my life. I absolutely can see how this book wouldn't be for everybody. I think that there's enough style in it and enough sort of maybe things that could trigger folks, and or some people just aren't into the sort of dark humor side. For me, I thought it incredibly worked, and I have recommended I loved the audio. I thought this reader did a fantastic job of delivering this content in the tone that really lent it, really helped me listen to this book the way that I did. Again, I can't stop talking about it to people, even though it wouldn't be my highest recommended book to a lot of folks. That being said, I think even if it isn't necessarily your style, it's definitely worth a chance to just give it a shot and see what you can learn about the topics and the themes and the setting and the characters' struggles that Rabi Alamuddin presents in this book. I got it from the library, as you saw on audio. It came up much quicker than I anticipated because thanks to my library, it got more copies due to the demand for this book. And I appreciate that so much. If I were to find the physical copy of this book ever in my thrifting or rummaging and or free little library situation, I would absolutely go bonkers for it and put it on my shelves and read it again, and then make the very hard decision about not wanting to keep it, wanting to make sure that it stays out cycling around so other people can get to it. Okay, apart from that audio, I want to talk about, I had two mystery thrillers. December just kind of felt like a good mystery thriller month to just get some off my shelf. So I kind of think the pile of possibilities are finishing up a couple of prompts from November, finishing up my 10 till the end, and I am 2.5 away from goal. And then, a bunch of randoms that came off hold. That's what I continue to see. Definitely randoms, lots of randoms. And I thought that I would get to more mystery thrillers, but it looks like these will probably be the only two of the month. So let's talk about them. Jar City by Anladur Indriðason. It's my second Anladur Indriðason book. This is translated from the Icelandic by Bernard Scudder. It's Scudder. Bernard Scudder. Setting is Iceland. It's called a Reykjavik thriller. However, there's this great map in here that I really appreciated that shows Iceland and Iceland here, Reykjavik here, and I really appreciated having that map to kind of, again, I'm into setting, to be able to familiarize myself with the setting, as I have never been to Iceland. Definitely on places I must and go, but everywhere is, so there's that. But this is a detective mystery. It's a bit of a little bit of a psychological thriller, I would say. Has your classic sort of twists that, you know, develop throughout the story as you kind of uncover more and uncover more. You know, nothing for me is really that unpredictable. So for like, I'm not one who can suspend disbelief for very long in thrillers, but people can. And I think that Onlader Anderson this is my second time in. I liked Jar City quite a bit less than the first book I read of his, I just thought of it the other day because I brought it up to somebody. But anyway, I liked that better because of it was like the Iceland's position in World War II, which I hadn't ever really thought about. And as a colony of Denmark, like, it covered that more. And this was less about any Icelandic history, just, you know, the characters in the book. There's a gender, neutral or gender unspecified character, which takes like the preface to understand how names work in Iceland to kind of lend itself to that. And in the note, it says something about like, what gender is this person? Oh, that's part of the intrigue. And I didn't find it intriguing in the way I think that note suggested that it should be. Not knowing someone's gender in the case of this story especially doesn't, like a detective, doesn't really lend itself too much. But that's just me. And I'm sorry if that was a bit of a spoiler. Going to Little Free Library. It came from Little Free Library, so it's going back. The other book, which also came from Little Free Library, this one I read a lot of it in the actual physical copy, but then I had to revert to the digital. So let me tell you about that. This book has been on hold for a very long time, probably because there's only one copy available and, you know, 3 people wanting to read it at once, and you wait the 3 weeks and then another 3 weeks. And so it can be, you know, 12 weeks just because 3 people are waiting for one copy. Such a Quiet Place by Megan Miranda is slow burn, somewhat, yeah, definitely psychological thriller. I quite liked the community pages and just sort of, I'm going to call it somewhat sharp social criticism on what I'm going to say is the BS that happens on them. I also appreciated that, okay, so the setting is like a peaceful cul-de-sac community, where, you know, there's a neighborhood watch and everybody's watching out for each other, but a crime occurs. So it was one of us kind of things. It looks a little bit at maybe police corruption in a very small way. I thought there was a little social commentary there that I appreciated. You know, it was subtle and I think well done. By the last fourth of this book, I just couldn't care. I finished it just because I was that close to finishing, but I just didn't find this story interesting anymore. The reveal was, again, I can't be someone to say, oh, it's this reveal was like, and that's why I read thrillers. It's not me. It is some people, as I said before, and that's cool. But even the reveal just didn't do it for me. I thought this was more than fine book. I don't think I'd pick up another Megan Miranda again. And as I just, have read these two from Mystery Thriller, I was like, oh yeah, that's probably the maximum in a month I would ever read, and should think more critically about maybe just unhauling some of my mystery thrillers. They tend to be very popular. People like to read mystery thriller. They're accessible. It has a wide readability, and I Both of these were fine. It's just not really my jam. Okay. Circe by Madeline Miller. This was my display book for a very long time. Look at it. I did find Son of Achilles in a little free library and passed it up because I hadn't read this yet, and I just thought I was being, in that case, I took a chance with a different book, which I didn't like at all. So much so that I regret not getting Son of Achilles now. When I was like 11 and 12, I was really into Greek mythology, and I've read the Iliad and the Odyssey several times. That being said, I found myself in this book being like, okay, I know this mythological character, and like, let me try to sort out how did it go and what do I know about them, because they are distant memories. So it was kind of a bit of a fun romp through memory land and what I thought that I remembered about content from so long ago in my life. This was a more than fun book. People have said that it's really feminist, and where I believe it is telling a female story, I didn't find it incredibly feminist, per se. And I could go more into that, and certainly if I were like in a book discussion, I would, if challenged, but I'm just going to leave it at that. Like, I'm not saying it's not, I just don't think it's the most feminist work I've read, because I have read some pretty powerfully feminist, inclusive, holistic works. This was one of my 10 until the end, and so that's checked. I really appreciated the sort of like list of characters at the end, which did reorient me to the characters and kind of their representation in other literature, such as the Odyssey, for example, as I think that's probably the most referenced source of some of the material in Circe. So I appreciated that. And this was, I was more than happy to have read this. I got this, I think, with credits, or it was a bargain deal at a independent bookstore. So actually, I bought this, I think, new. It's one of my only actual new books on my shelf. I'm wondering if this won't be one of them that I go and trade for credit for 50% off of another book, because there are, like, The Vegetarian, for example, by Han Jin, is something that I would really like to get my hands on. Drive Your Plow Over My Bones, something I'd really liked. Like, there's a couple books that just I haven't seen in any of these book sale, whatever, I keep hoping they'll come up, that I would really like to get my hands on, which a used bookstore, or an independent bookstore is probably more like it. So this one, because I bought it new, I would like to have my $3 to $5 worth of credit for it, perhaps. That's where I think that's going. Another book that actually got used, but at a much larger price than I would normally pay, because I used a gift certificate at an independent bookstore in Portland, Oregon, is Edition by Katie Kitamura, and it is signed. So I might try to, trade both of these for credit. That being said, I think the Friends of the Library could probably get almost what I paid for this signed book from someone. So I might put it there. Okay, but now I'm talking more about where I'm going to unhaul a book than the actual content in the book. Edition by Katie Kitamura is it's one of those books that when you're reading it, it's great. It's fine. It's fine. She's got, her sentencing is good. Her absolutely use of tension. It was interesting that I read this while I was reading Mystery Thrillers, because I could really see the parallel between, how she was using language and building her story. It almost felt like a suspense, although it's not a suspense. I really appreciated the part 1 and the part 2, and I know that the intention was to to sort of like suss out when are people acting or when they're not. But I took it as a mother who also has a whole life not being a mother, that like one could really explore someone's persona and the relationships they have, even with their own children, as friends, colleagues, mentors, and their significant others. Like you could look at a life like that, and then you could turn around and look at like what your other persona has to do and to live up to the parenting role. I think that she did a lot with a little. And I think she did it incredibly well. Is this like a book that I loved or like really, really enjoyed the way that I enjoyed the true story of Raja the Gullible and his mother? No, I wouldn't put this even on my top like enjoyable books. However, one that made me think a lot and one whose craft was like really on point, for sure. I will say that I'm kind of glad that I also had read really recently Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri, which, to be fair, I enjoyed this book more than this one, for a lot of reasons. And I think that might just be that I really love Jhumpa Lahiri's writing style. In, I think, this case, the interaction with the setting is what's really important. And that's how we understand the identity and the nuances of this character. And I think in this case, there's more explicit things done to know, like, for instance, she's a mother in one part and she's not a mother in the other part. And that's explicitly said. The main character in this is not a mother. They're both in their mid to late 40s. Also really relatable for me right now. However, like in both cases, it's the setting and the things that going on around that make us as a reader understand this character. Like from that lens, we get to know the character. Also with some pretty clever but short inner dialogue. Like they're both quite internal as well. And so you're removing other plot devices, so you can really kind of get down to the nitty gritty of those things in both of these books. And I thought that they both did them very well. And I really appreciate that I read them in the same reading period. I thought that was great. I think that I'll also mention that, okay, so my third to the last, 10 Until the End, my last Booker, is by the author that won the Booker of the Bookers, which is Salman Rushdie, and that is The Satanic Verses. Now, I bumped a much smaller short story because I was mistaken. I mistakenly thought that The Satanic Verses won the Booker. I think it was 1988. So this would be my oldest Booker read of this last, like when I was reading Bookers. And indeed, it did not. It did not win. It got shortlisted, but it did not win. He won the Booker for All Midnight's Children, not for The Satanic Verses. I will, would never blaspheme the craft of the writing, like Salman Rushdie's writing craft. That being said, his sentencing, and story building and integration of real and dreamscape, certainly lends itself fantastically to the criticism, the social commentary and criticism and investigation and meditation on religion and the harm that it may or may not do and has or has not caused throughout history, and colonization and cultural interpretation of religion and conflict created by it, fame, lots of existential questions as well in this book. It is dense thematically, which, we will find in sort of like what's considered a classic. And I think he's nailing that. That being said, I am at times I mean, like the sentence is whimsical and lyrical, and then poignant at times, and then preposterous at times. So weeding through all of that as a reader, maybe not in my classic era either. I feel I oscillate between being mystified, completely lost, intrigued, and intrigued and bored. Sometimes I'm just literally like, roll my eyes. I don't know. I don't know. Like, I don't know if I want to do the work to get to the point of this. And that's sort of on me. And I think that's also telling to the sophistication of this writing. I found myself being like, do I know like the mythology behind this? And I understand that if someone's practicing a religion, they don't want it called mythology. No, I was on an island in Greece looking at like temples from major ancient religions and listening to the anthropology say, in 3,000 to 5,000 to 10,000 years, whatever religion you think your practice is probably going to be called a mythology too. So I'm just using that as a reference. I found myself trying to recall how much of this story I'm familiar with, and how this retelling, so that I could really fully intellectualize this retelling in the similar way that I was doing with Circe. I think in both cases, knowing the background text and systems and stories is really useful for a critical reader, but I don't know if it's necessary. I think that one could read the book and probably still get a whole heck of a lot out of it without that information. It's dense. And like I said, sometimes I'm completely like, whoa, that's so poignant, underline. And I'm reading it in Libby because this font won't work for me. And then other times I'm just like, no, I got to put this down. I'm totally disengaged from this book. I just fell out of this book 100%. So I'm it's a 500-page book, and I'm trying to commit myself to around 100 pages of it a day and just try to stick with it to try to come close to finishing it or get further into it. I'm in part 3, Elohim Deloween. Oh, no, Elohim Deoween. Just to like get far enough in it to make a decision, like, is it okay to DNF it if it's just not working? Not saying anything about the book, just like if it's just not working for right now. The Hate U Give was an adorable. I have just a few pages left at the end, about a fourth or less of this book left. Adorable, no, poignant, timely, contemporary, especially for its publication date of 2017. Look at the issues of the time and the frets and navigation around them of a Black 17-year-old in Los Angeles, California. I find the character likable, believable. I find this story easy to navigate, and this book is young adult, so it is written for other 17-year-olds to find themselves in this, or teenagers to find themselves in this story. And as someone who is not 17, all I can do is speculate that it is indeed doing a good job at that, at least in my estimation. The last book that I am listening to is Black Case by Charmaine Wilkerson. I'm going to withhold comments. I do have quite a few. I am halfway into it now. I'm halfway. I don't particularly like this reader. I don't like how she does the male voices. That's just like me being picky. But alas, here I go. I've dedicated to listen to this on my commutes to work. And I don't even know if I'm going to get a walk in this evening. That just terrible weather, windy, rainy kind of stuff going on. So I don't know, maybe I'll walk around my apartment and listen to it that way. But that was another just random rabbit hole I flew down. I will talk more about this in my wrap up for next week, because I will definitely be done with it for next week, and I think that's a good time to talk about this. I will probably talk more about the Satanic Verses as well, as I'm only, a third less, a third of the way into the book, and hope to have finished it, or decided not to finish it, and give some final thoughts on it next week as well.